Welcome to Wednesday Wisdom.
Good morning. This is Jos Visser, the author of Wednesday Wisdom, and this week's article is called The Swamp and the City: How Huge Projects Fail Hugely. This article is a reprint of an original that was published 2 years ago in the walled garden of an intranet, which is where Wednesday Wisdom lived in the days before it escaped into the wild. In the late 1990s, I worked on a huge project that sought to redo the entire global transaction services of a large Dutch bank. The bank had developed big international ambitions, and so it thought it needed a big overhaul to create an ultra-modern, globally integrated set of services for its large customers. It hired the most expensive consultants it could find, and they set about designing a shining city on a hill. There are lots of reasons why this was one of the most memorable projects I have ever worked on, but one reason stands out in particular. It failed hugely. The bank spent hundreds of millions of euros and the project went absolutely nowhere. We rearranged lots of toner on blank pages, but not one useful system was built, let alone rolled out. Eventually, the main contractor was fired and the project got scaled down significantly. Even then, it struggled mightily, but something eventually happened that they could chalk up as a minor success of sorts. IT projects are extremely prone to failure. A 2009 IDC report stated that 25% of IT projects experience utter failure. The rest doesn't fare much better. About 50% of projects require rework, and about 20% of them fail to provide a return on investment. If there is any rule, it seems to be that the bigger the projects are, the harder they fail. According to Gartner, who doesn't love them, projects with budgets over $1 million are 50% more likely to underperform than smaller projects. They also concluded that 31% of projects under investigation were deemed complete and utter failures, 52% were partially unsuccessful, and only 16% of projects were completed successfully. These are sobering numbers, and they should influence our behavior. Personally, I'm very interested in failure, to the point that at one point, I co-ran the Boston chapter of Fuck Up Nights. This is a worldwide series of events where people with experience about these things come to talk about the things that went horribly wrong in their business or project. Because, remember, experience is what you get when you were expecting something else. If you've never been to a Fuck Up Nights event, find your local chapter and attend a few. It's a lot of fun. Why do things fail, and why do huge IT projects in particular fail so often? Fun side story. In law school, I had to take a class on how to argue a case. The case I got assigned to defend was that of an IT contractor that had messed up a project. I felt right at home and obliterated opposing counsel. Before we get into the finer details of why projects fail, let's begin by calling out an uncommon cause of failure: a lack of qualified people. Of course, trying to pull off a project with below par staff is doomed from the start, but in my experience this rarely happens. Of the failing projects that I partook in, I have a lot of doubt whether better engineers could have pulled it off. On the aforementioned Global Transaction Services project, I worked with some of the smartest people I have ever worked with, all experts in their field and all with impressive amounts of knowledge, skills, and experience. But still, the project failed hugely, despite having more than enough talent. This is of course a known phenomenon in sports as well. If the talent of individual players was the only critical factor, surely the French soccer team Paris Saint-Germain, PSG, would have won a major tournament by now. But they'll have another shot on May 31st. Allez! So, outcomes do not solely correlate with the expertise of the people working on the project. If it would, most projects would probably not fail, or at least not to the extent that they do. Individual expertise surely matters, but what does it actually matter for? And what are the other things that matter? In my experience, projects typically also do not fail because people have no idea what needs to be built. The idea that projects need to start with a requirements gathering phase has been solidly entrenched for decades now. All the way back in college, The first project we did for our practical software development class started with requirements gathering. The idea is that old. Sure enough, it's a tricky job and hard to get right, but I dare say projects do not fail because we have no idea about requirements. If anything, a lot of work has been done to make this part better, for instance, by recognizing the role of the subject matter expert, whose job it is to ensure that whatever is built meets the needs of the stakeholders, legislation, policy, standards, and best practices. That said, a failure to completely grok the details of a problem is still a major obstacle in writing correct programs, something I wrote about somewhere else. So even if we know what needs to be built and we have the right people to build it, a lot of projects still fail. Why is that? In my experience, the major reason for failure is too much ambition coupled with an underestimation of the complexity of the road to get there. Projects invariably start with a lot of energy. There's a problem, and we're going to fix it because we have ideas. A lot of projects start with an unconstrained phase where people are brainstorming ideas on how to solve things. However, they typically do not brainstorm on how to solve it. To the point that they do that, it is usually a complete technology push, where architects get to propose their hobby horse du jour, like data streaming, Spanner, or a brand new yet-to-be-built workflow system. Most brainstorming discusses a future ideal situation. This is an example of a common problem with humans, which is our tendency to focus on the fun parts of any activity that we're engaging in. The future ideal situation is a fun thing to think about. We're completely unconstrained and can therefore imagine a perfect solution, a system that works flawlessly to solve the set of problems at hand. It is here where PowerPoint architects excel, drawing impressive diagrams with boxes and arrows and employing the latest technologies and patterns. Unfortunately, we're almost never in a greenfield situation where we can build a solution in perfect isolation. And even if we could, by the time we're done building that solution, the problem will have morphed into something else altogether, for which our brand new solution doesn't work very well. Since we are not in a greenfield situation, we usually need to fix the problems at hand by iterating from one working situation to another one. That iteration constrains us mightily in all sorts of annoying ways. For one thing, it turns the project into a much larger endeavor than anyone imagined, because there's all this work involved in ensuring that the system we have continues to work. It also means spending time and energy on migrating from one state to the next. I dare say this is nobody's favorite part of any project. Figuring out the myriad of details that will allow us to evolve the existing system into a better state, one small step at a time, is important and often not fun. And since it's not fun, not a lot of people want to work on it or think about it. Surely, it's much more fun to build a new workflow engine than it is to figure out the nitty-gritty of how today's systems and processes actually work, which is usually completely different from how people think it works. The users, developers, and administrators of any system that is in production are like people living in mud huts in a swamp. The mud huts are rickety, the mosquitoes are a menace, and there are swamp fires everywhere. Additionally, some of the bigger buildings that are foundational to the entire endeavor are sinking into the ground. Clearly, what we need is a shiny new city. So the city planners get to work. And before long, we're discussing whether the public transport system in the shiny new city needs to be a subway, a tram, or electric buses. This gives rise to many meetings, documents, and heated discussions. In the meantime, the crew tasked with keeping the swamp going are drowning in the mud. The need to iterate from one working situation to the next could preclude certain ideal futures. To stick with the swamp metaphor, the need to keep the swamp working for all people who work and live there today might preclude us from building a subway. Can you imagine building the underground system of London today, assuming that the city is exactly like it is today but without the tube? Of course, some high-level idea about the future situation is required, but the level of detail needs to match the timeline. If we guess it's going to be 3 years out, then the only thing we need now are sketches of what needs to go where, approximately. What kills many projects is a mismatch between the level of ambition with respect to the goal and the neglect of concrete ideas on how to get there. Most projects that fail have a huge ambition level coupled with a fantastically clear vision on the future ideal situation, but without a plan on how to get there in small steps that iterate from one working situation to the next. Sure, the nitty-gritty of the small steps to the bright future is not a lot of fun, unless you're me, since I have a warped idea about what's considered fun. But let me repeat two mottos that I discussed in earlier articles. First, work is not fun, which is why we call your salary compensation. Two, ideas are cheap. Execution is what matters. The beauty of coupling a high level idea of the future with concrete plans on how to get there is that you start making things better immediately. Additionally, it will be easier to adapt the future situation to the ever changing current circumstances. Your value to the company is not that you can design the shiny city on the hill. That's the easy bit. Your value is that you know how to get there while keeping the swamp that you're in right now functioning.
Hello, Alpha Tower, birds on the runway, 9 for Sierra Papa.
Copy. Use caution for birds on the runway near Bravo.